Hello, everybody, and welcome to my preseason deep dive special, where over the course of the next couple weeks, we are going to preview all 136 teams at the FBS level going into the 2025 season. I'm very excited to, get some of these thoughts that I have, quick thoughts about every single team at the FBS level, as well as eventually get to that point where we are glossing over and deciding who do we think should make the college football playoff, as well as go through and win the national championship at the end of the season, because that is, of course, the ultimate prize in all of college football, hoisting that national title crown in that early February, late January type of time frame. So I am very excited to go ahead and get this 2025 preseason deep dive series started. And we will, in fact, go through every single conference as well as every single team. So hopefully you guys enjoy this series. And if you do enjoy this series, as well as enjoy the content here on College Football Red Zone, make sure to go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. That helps me out tremendously. And before we dive into the first conference that I want to dive into for the 2025 preseason deep dive, I want to give a quick little note in terms of how each of the graphics work. So what we are going to do is, for every single team that we talk about, there is going to be 4 different number sets for each different team. And I'll have this set up in the description so that you guys could follow along if you want to speed through this explanation. But essentially what each number represents next to each individual team is your blue number is going to represent the preseason power ranking that I have for each team. That is my internal power rating model that we are basing a lot of these predictions on. And then we have records that are in green, yellow, and red. The green number represents the best case scenario for each team. The yellow number represents what my true record prediction is. And then that red number is really that worst case scenario in my mind. What could that team finish with over the course of the season? So that is what we're working with each individual team. And with that being cleaned up, let's go ahead and now jump into the ACC going into this particular season, because I'll tell you this. The ACC football season is shaping up to be one of the most dynamic and competitive in recent memory. I mean, we've seen some fun teams being added over the course of last season. Stanford and California, for example, being up there in terms of, providing that West Coast Pac-12 chaos that the Pac-12 was known for before the dissolution of that original conference. We are very happy to see them back, but that was really what Stanford and Cal brought, and we certainly saw some chaotic moments from both of those teams over the last couple of seasons. But the most notable addition that we saw of recent memory does have to be SMU, where we do see SMU, ultimately making that college football playoff appearance. So that now brings the ACC up to 17 teams, and this is the second year in a row that we will have a 17-team conference, which is one of the largest in all of college football. It's the only conference that is smaller than the ACC is the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has 18. We also saw in recent memory the traditional divisional model of the ACC kind of falling by the wayside. A couple of years ago, we saw the Atlantic and Coastal divisions existing. That is no longer a thing. The division model is effectively gone from the ACC. It was replaced by a 3-5-5 model, where that, in spite of the conference being a lot bigger, it at least allows teams to to all play each other every few years, which should help at least with the discrepancy that we have seen from the strength of schedule standpoint moving forward. And that's just not from comparing teams from different conferences. That's even comparing teams from the exact same conference as well. We see the strength of schedule discrepancies. So hopefully that does help with that moving forward. We will also see the ACC probably continue its reputation in terms of being a powerhouse at the quarterback position moving forward, because in my personal top 25 rankings that I did break out on Twitter, we do see 6 such of those quarterbacks come in to the ACC. Now, this quarterback class in the ACC is headlined by Cade Klubnik, of course, who, had that amazing season last year, throwing for over 3,600 yards and 36 touchdowns on a way to an ACC championship and a playoff appearance. But there is a peripheral new sheriff in town, and the town is certainly not big enough for the two of us, as the Georgia transfer Carson Beck has joined the Miami Hurricanes over the course of the offseason, which is, imagine saying that this time last year, where many people thought, Carson Beck was going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft that took place back in April. No, he is still going to remain here at Miami and is going to look to really help provide that last clearing hurdle before Miami is truly back. They were very close. But we can't talk about the quality of quarterback play just from Cade Klubnik and Carson Beck specifically, though. We also have to talk about guys like Kevin Jennings, who does return after leading SMU in its inaugural season of Power Conference football. They walked into a Power Conference. They really snuck up on a lot of people last fall and made the ACC championship, narrowly lost to Clemson, and actually it was probably a game that SMU should have won, all things considered. But then they also make a trip to the college football playoff as well. It was their first trip. They did end in a heartbreaking, well, they were decimated by Penn State, let's be real, but a very good season for SMU, led by Kevin Jennings. In addition, you also have Miller Moss, who really was a Holiday Bowl game darling back in 2023, had these bigger expectations last season, really fell short, which was not completely his fault, but he leaves USC, goes into the transfer portal, and joins Louisville. And this was a Louisville offense under Jeff Brom that was already projecting to be a somewhat dangerous team this year. Having Miller Moss in the fold could be even more potent for Louisville this upcoming season if Miller Moss can live up to his potential that many saw in that 2023 Holiday Bowl season. Meanwhile, of course, we got some newcomers in here as well. Darian Mensah being one of them. He does transfer to the Duke Blue Devils after lighting things up last year with Tulane. Plus, we have, of course, Haynes King. He's got the leadership. He's got the toughness and really has Georgia Tech really in a pivotal position to lead the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets to really one of their best seasons in recent memory over Brent Pry. In addition, we do see the ACC also welcome fresh leadership on the sideline for multiple programs. But one of the most intriguing developments, not only of this particular conference, but in all of college football, I mean, it has to be the hiring of NFL legend Bill Belichick and those 5 Super Bowl rings that he won with the New England Patriots. His extensive experience and strategic acumen are expected to bring really a new level of discipline and innovation to the program that kind of has had a difficult time escaping that period of mediocrity that we see North Carolina accustomed to the past few years under Mac Brown. It was time for him to move on. As much of a legendary coach that he is, mainly from his time at Texas. So with that being said, got some seasoned veterans, got some, some top-notch coaching, some very good coaches in this conference. So we should be in for some high-level competition across the board. One where I think that is a legitimate possibility that we could, in fact, see multiple teams once again represent the ACC in the college football playoff. I think that is certainly possible, and I would venture to say that I would bet on it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look from that 50,000 feet perspective of what I think of every single team in the ACC now. And we're going to go ahead and start from the very bottom of my projected ACC finish. Now, I do not have the autonomy to obviously choose, like, I'm not a participant in any preseason polls by any means, at least for these conferences. But hypothetically, though, let's just say that I do, in fact, have a preseason ballot in front of me. How would I fill it out for the ACC? So, all that said, we are going to start at the very bottom. So my 17th ranked team in the ACC will have to be the Stanford Cardinal. Listen, here's the thing about Stanford. While Frank Wright, he's certainly a pretty good choice in terms of being an interim coach for 2025. He's that, peripheral adult in the room. You get yourself a guy that certainly knows his X's and O's stemming from his NFL experience, mainly with the Indianapolis Colts. If we are going to see Stanford break through the bottom of the barrel, Andrew Luck is going to have to find someone long term, whether it is Frank Wright or whether it is somebody else that does have a solidified long term vision and knows how to recruit and understand what Stanford is all about. Because so for Stanford, they're one of those schools where you can't just go and get anybody. This is one of the strongest academic schools in the entire country. This is so because of those rigorous academic standards, it's more difficult to go after a certain type of recruit. So you're looking for players that can actually play at the FBS level, and particularly a power conference brand of football, but also have the grades good enough to actually get admitted into Stanford at the same time, which is not the easiest thing to do necessarily. So for Stanford, I do have as my number 17th ranked team. I had them going 2-10, a few possible toss-up games, and I do want to point out, even though I have Stanford winning a couple of games, there's no layups on this schedule. I think Hawaii is an improved team from last year that could provide some fits in week number 0. They're also hosting San Jose State. They played them last year, lost to them last year. They're hosting them this time around. And I think San Jose State, in their own right, is going to be a pretty good football team at the G5 level. So while I think Stanford wins both of those games, it's certainly not layups. So there is a real possibility that Stanford can go the entire season without winning a single game. It could be a rough transition year in 2025, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of winning any games in the ACC. They do have the opportunity to host Cal, and while I'm not predicting outright that Cal is going to lose to Stanford, it's a rivalry game and you do have them at home. Therefore, it's certainly in that realm of possibility. I do have that as a toss-up. Next up on my list, I have the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest coming in at number 16. Jake Dickard takes over a team that really only has a small number of returning starters after a disappointing 4-8 campaign. But this is a guy that is coming from Washington State, and for those that are more familiar with Pullman, Washington, Washington State is not the easiest place to win at, and he was able to find a way to win in spite of the Pac-12 completely imploding. But now he goes out here to Wake Forest, tries to rebuild this team from the ground up, which, if you guys remember, like in those late 2010s, even mid 2010s, Wake Forest has had some good teams, so it is possible for somebody to come in and win here at Wake Forest. It just might not necessarily happen this year, but because there is going to be some significant amount of work that has to be done on both sides of the ball. That being said, though, if you want a bright spot on this roster, Damon Claiborne, the running back for Wake Forest, he's someone that could be a stud. He's falling a little bit under the radar just because Wake Forest is not getting a lot of attention in general, but he could be a special player. And if I were the coach of Wake Forest, I would make him the centerpiece of my offense. But it could be a long year as well for Wake Forest. I have them going 3-9. And I'm really not moving from that 3-9 marker as of right now. Coming in at number 15, we got the Virginia Cavaliers. Now, Virginia Cavaliers, they were pretty active in the transfer portal. I actually liked their transfer portal additions, most notably the quarterback out of North Texas and Chandler Morris, who had a pretty prolific season in 2024, granted at the American Conference level. But between Chandler Morris as well as some of those other key transfer portal additions, Tony Elliott might have his best team since arriving in Charlottesville to be the coach of his team. So, I'm looking at this Virginia squad and with the talent that they infused from the transfer portal, reaching a Bowls game for the very first time since 2021, that definitely has to be in the realm of possibility. Now, for that bowl game to happen, I think there's 5 games on here for Virginia that I feel comfortable saying that, they should win those games. But if they are able to pull off bowl eligibility, it's likely going to be their road matchup that they have against Cal. If they find a way to beat Cal on the road, I think that is going to be enough to get them to 6-6 and achieve that bowl game status for the very first time since 2021. Now, speaking of the Cal Bears, however, they are actually the next team that I have ranked in the ACC. They're my 14th best team. And honestly, a different vibe between Cal and Virginia, right? Because Cal, you can consider them one of the bigger losers of the offseason with the amount of losses that they really sustained in the offseason. They lost Fernando Mendoza to Indiana. They also lost Jaden Ott to Oklahoma as well. So there was a good number of losses on this transfer portal. This was a rough go for the Cal Bears. I'm not going to lie to you. But I will say that this is not a completely hopeless situation for Cal. They did bring in the Ohio State transfer in Devin Brown, who did play in a handful of moments, was a backup there for a couple of years. But they also pulled in the true freshman JKS. That is Jerron Kalele Zagapulete. For those that are Cal fans, I probably butchered that pronunciation, so if y'all can let me know how it's pronounced, let me know. I would truly appreciate that. They're probably going to pull for JKS to win his starting job. I believe he's a 5-star true freshman who arrived early for Oregon and then decided to dip, came to Cal instead. So that's something to watch out for in terms of a quarterback battle. But on the defensive side of the ball, they also bring in Cade Uleve, who will serve as one of the leaders of this Bears defense. So, yes, they sustained some losses in the transfer portal, but it's certainly not completely hopeless. I don't completely dismiss the possibility of them making a bowl game either, but I do have them going 4-8. And, a few of those games to watch, which most of them we've already talked about, that is them hosting Virginia at the end of the season. And that is also playing Stanford on the road as well in that rivalry game environment. Plus Oregon State. They have to go and play Oregon State. And the Beavers are a solid football team in their own right as well. Next up, we have the Boston College Eagles coming in at number 13. Now, for Boston College, Bill O'Brien in his first year did successfully lead them to a bowl season. Thought they were going to be a little bit better after what they were able to accomplish, being competitive against Missouri, as well as upsetting Florida State early on in the season. But things definitely fizzled out in the second half of the year, and it's another mediocre season. Now you get into year number 2 of Bill O'Brien, and you have to address holes along the offensive line as well as replace the production of Donovan Ezaraku, who has left for the NFL. So that was already going to be a tough task. But then you also add on to the fact that they lost their starting quarterback to a fellow conference team. Just nefarious work by Florida State. You saw him slice up the Florida State defense like, nah, we can't have that happen again. So they take their quarterback, which is crazy. So because of all of those holes that they need to address on the offensive line, as well as, replacing one of their best edge rushers, plus losing their starting quarterback as well through the transfer portal, I think this is going to be a difficult year for Boston College. I have them going 4-8 straight up. Meanwhile, staying in the northeastern part of the country, we are going to take a look at the Syracuse Orange, who now come in as my 12th best team. Listen, this was a little bit of a surprise here, seeing Fran Brown in his first year up in that part of the country lead Syracuse to that 10-win campaign. However, trying to replicate that success is going to be a little bit more difficult because, well, they are going to have a little bit more difficult of a schedule to navigate. You know, you're talking about a little bit more difficult of an ACC schedule. Plus, you start the season out by playing Tennessee on a neutral site. Yes, Tennessee might not be as good as last year, but that's still a team that Syracuse is going to come in as probably a 2-touchdown underdog. We're going to be real with you on that. Plus, Kyle McCord, your starting quarterback, has left for the NFL as well. But with that being said, there is some intriguing players to watch at the quarterback position because they did bring in multiple transfers. Ricky Collins, who came in like during the wintertime, he transfers in from LSU. But I think who my favorite is going to be to win this starting job is the transfer out of Notre Dame in Steve Ungele, who came in and had some good moments throughout the season when Riley Leonard was hurt. But because CJ Carr looked so good, Steve Ungele felt like he had to enter the transfer portal to have a shot at the starting job. So now he is here with Syracuse trying to help Fran Brown out in year number 2. So, yes, they did have that 10-win season, but I think this is going to be a year in which they are going to take a step back because of those losses that they sustained and the increased difficulty in the strength of schedule. I still think this is a team capable of going to a bowl game. I had them going 6-6, but it's going to be real important. If they do want to go bowling, they have to win all 3 of these games. Because they do at least have them at home. You got Duke, you got Pitt, and you got North Carolina all at home. I think it's extremely important for Syracuse to win all of those games in order to achieve that bowl eligibility. I think that's going to be vital. Coming in at number 11 in the ACC is the NC State Wolfpack. The NC State Wolfpack came in, they were seen as a sleeper team. They were ranked in the top 25 early in the season, and then they were humbled quickly, ironically also by Tennessee. Now they're going to be a little bit on the back burner, so to speak, as my 11th best team in the ACC. But they do have some intriguing candidates, and honestly, the offense should be electric in 2025 as well, which is something you should be very excited about if you're an NC State fan, because you do have the potential breakout candidate in CJ Bailey playing that quarterback position. Plus, you have the All-American Justin Jolly, who at least has All-American type potential as well. So the offense should be humming pretty well for NC State if everything breaks right. But the biggest question mark for NC State moving forward is how does DJ Elliott, who is the brand new defensive coordinator for this Wolfpack staff, how does he go about addressing really the multiple question marks that are surrounding the defensive side of the ball, multiple units, not a weakness necessarily, but you're looking at that NC State defense, and there's certainly question marks all over the place that will require some answers sooner than later. So with that, I do have them going 7-5 with the potential of going 8-4. And for their toss-up games, thankfully they are all at home against tougher ACC teams such as Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and another team that's probably about on the same level as NC State, probably literally about the same level, and that is North Carolina, led by Bill Belichick. And speaking of Bill Belichick, they do come in number 10 in my ACC rankings as of right now. So, Bill Belichick comes in to lead this program. It was quite the media storm. I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the hospital with my son. He was just born the day before this news broke. So, it certainly becomes one of the most fascinating teams and also one of the bigger question marks in all of college football because of all of the roster overhaul that took place because of the departure of Mac Brown and the subsequent hiring of Bill Belichick as well. So I think that it's a safe bet to assume that North Carolina will at least make a bowl game. I think the pieces are in place and where even like under the worst case scenario, they should still be bowl eligible. But with how the schedule lines up, this is kind of the SMU situation that we saw last year, where, or even like Indiana from the Big Ten, where you can really look out and see, okay, if everything breaks right and this team is actually humming, they could mess around and be a 10-2, 11-1 type team, make the playoff and be one of the bigger surprises in college football. There is certainly that type of potential with North Carolina. Now, do I think they're a CFP caliber team? No, but with how the schedule lines up and the ACC logo still having some sort of respect, if they were to somehow finish in that best case 11-1, I think they would be in the playoff at that point. But for now, I am kind of shooting the middle in this one. Got them going 8-4, and really what's going to decide this season early on is they are playing TCU at home. They're at the road against UCF as well. So those two games are both happening very early in the year for North Carolina. And that is going to really set the tone for how this season could end up going if they win both. And I mean, there is some potential, and maybe you do see the fan base get a little bit more excited if they win both of those games. But then you also have a few more potential toss-ups in ACC play, whether it be your rivals in Duke and North Carolina State playing both of those rivals, as well as playing against Fran Brown on the road. I think Fran Brown versus Bill Belichick, that could be an intriguing coaching matchup as well, with the age and the experience discrepancy, but Fran Brown being the more successful college coach as of so far. But now we go and jump into really the upper half of the ACC now, or at least we get to that middle point. We now come in at number 9 with the Pitt Panthers. So Pitt was a team last year. They were absolutely on a tear in 2024 before injuries to Eli Holstein and Desmond Reed as well really seized all their momentum, because after that 7-0 start, they really were not the same. They didn't win a single game after going on that 7-0 start. So losing 6 games in a row to end the year, that really brings some concern from a momentum standpoint. But the good news is both of those stars that I talked about, they are back for this season. They should also have a strong defense this fall, which will be extremely helpful too. So because of the fact that they do have a strong defense, and I liked what I saw from Eli Holstein when he was healthy, you see the 7-5 best case scenario. If everything comes together, they are a dark horse within the ACC. Could make some noise within the conference and really make my preseason prediction look stupid. Could actually surpass that 7-5 record, but for now, because I'm not fully sure how this team is going to respond after losing 6 games in a row, I do have them barely making a bowl game again at 6-6, with the best case being 7-5. And I believe if Pitt is going to make the ACC championship, they are going to have to win either one of West Virginia on the road, which is the backyard brawl, key rivalry game, or winning on the road against Syracuse as well. I think Pitt's going to have to win one of those 2 games if they want to go bowling this year. Now, coming in at number 8, we have the Duke Blue Devils, as this program is led by Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz, listen, he has surpassed initial expectations at Duke, leading Duke to a 9-win season last year. And on top of that, yes, you do lose Malik Murphy. He goes across the country to now play at Oregon State, but you backfill that with Darian Mensah, who, as we talked about earlier in this ACC deep dive, he was lining up at the American and could certainly do that here again. Plus, we know the identity of Manny Diaz. This is a well-coached defense. They could mess around and make a 9-win season happen again, but it might be a little bit more difficult to do that with how their schedule does line up. So I do have them also as a 6-6 team, but I do also believe that a 9-win season is also in the cards if everything goes their way. So if they can beat Syracuse on the road, beat North Carolina on the road, beat their rival, and then find a way to take down Georgia Tech at home, really frustrate Haynes King, I think that 9-3 season is possible. But if they want to get to that 9-win mark that they established last year, beating Syracuse, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina, that's going to be how Duke is going to get that done. Moving on to number 7 in the ACC rankings, we now go to Virginia Tech, the Hokies, who their head coach might genuinely be on the hot seat, right? Because of how disappointing 2024 was. We saw all their returning production, and the 2024 Virginia Tech team is a perfect example of realizing that returning production isn't everything, because the returning production tells you that Virginia Tech should have won 9 to 10 games last year. That really didn't happen. So, needless to say, I don't know if I would go far to say as Brent Pry is on the hot seat, but I do think that Brent Pry is certainly feeling some competitive pressure after how last season went down, which is ironically somehow a perfect time to break in. You got multiple new coordinators, and unlike last year, the returning production isn't there for Virginia Tech. They only have 4 returning starters returning from last year's team, which, because of how disappointing things were, that might not be the worst thing in the world. But they do have Kyron Drones coming back, and if he can remain healthy for a full year, because that was a little bit of an issue last fall, then we can certainly see the Hokies surpass the expectations that I have for them, which I do have Virginia Tech hovering as a 6 to 7 win team. Up next at number 6, we have Florida State coming in after... Remember when Florida State was a top 10 team in the nation last year? Do you guys remember that? Pepperidge Falls certainly remembers that. Look, it can't get worse. It really cannot get worse than the 2-10 season that they had, which I don't think anybody could have even fathomed Florida State actually doing that. Even the biggest bum SU hater would have not seriously said Florida State is going to finish 2-10 unless they were absolutely trolling. It was one of the biggest shockers of the entire year. So because of how last year went, Mike Norvell did come out, made several significant changes to the program, including bringing in multiple new coordinators and several key transfer additions, such as someone who we talked about earlier in Thomas Castellanos from Boston College. But hopefully, for Coach Norvell's sake, hopefully all those changes between bringing in all the coordinators and bringing in all of the transfer portal additions once again, hopefully that could lead to a bounce back season, because he was able to survive that 2-10 campaign because he did coach a team in 2023 that, in my honest opinion, should have made the college football playoff. I thought they should have gotten in over Alabama because I believe that they were a more deserving team. But that grace is now gone, and you're going to have to produce much better than what you did last year. We'll see how Florida State fans feel about it, but I do have them hovering as a 7 to 8 win team. So, a solid season, but it might be considered a little bit disappointing given the prestige of the Florida State program. But we'll have to see how things shake out on that front. So that now brings us into the top 5. And so the top 5 gets started with Georgia Tech, which is, it really shows that this could genuinely be a year in which we do see that Georgia Tech program break out under Brett Key. They will have one of the most dynamic backfields in the ACC, with not only Haynes King, who I have as one of my 25 best quarterbacks in the entire country, but you do also have Jamal Haynes coming in from the backfield as well. So that should be a very exciting backfield to look out for this fall. Plus, the defense should also be improved under defensive coordinator Blake Gideons, which means there is just a lot to like about Georgia Tech. And it's going to be the first team that I have on here that I genuinely believe could win 10 games. Although I'm not going to put it set in stone because the road games against Duke and the road games against NC State could be a little bit tricky. So worst case scenario, they could be 8-4, which is similar to where they were last year. But I truly would lean towards this team really having a breakout year, and I can't wait to watch Georgia Tech play this fall. I think they're going to be an exciting team to watch. Speaking of exciting teams to watch, though, the Louisville Cardinals have to be another one of those exciting squads. Coming in at number 4 in my ACC rankings. If Miller Moss can live up to the expectations from his 2023 Holiday Bowl performance, where he had that, I think it was like a 6 touchdown performance in his first stunt, and then you also couple that with a defense that can show some signs of improvement, man, Jeff Brom could very well have this Cardinals team playing in the ACC championship at the end of the regular season, because they have certainly shown that Louisville can in fact play with the big boys. They're not the type of team that can come out and maybe go into a playoff and win those 3 to 4 games necessary to win a national championship. They're not that kind of program, but they are the type of team where you see them on your schedule, and regardless of who you are, that is a team that is going to really give you hell for 60 minutes. You have to show up and play for Louisville. That's the type of program that they are, and I think there is a real shot. They got Clemson at home. That is a toss-up game that I have for them. There is a real shot that they pull that upset off against Clemson. I don't think it would be that wild if we saw that happen. So, again, Louisville is probably going to be a team that, could be in that 9 to 10 win range. If they pull the upset off on Clemson, we'll see them in that ACC championship game, I would imagine. But again, we do have to see it happen, though. I think if you want to see Louisville in the ACC championship game, they are going to have to get through Clemson and handle business throughout the rest of the ACC slate. Speaking of the rest of the ACC slate, we do also have SMU, which will now come in number 3 in my ACC rankings coming into the preseason. Look, SMU, they are not going to fly under the radar like they did last year. They snuck up on a lot of people. People weren't really paying attention to SMU until really that second half of the regular season, and then people looked at it and was like, oh, they're a 6-1, 7-0 team. They're ranked, and they're playing another ranked team in Pitt, and they were crushing it. Like, what is going on with this SMU team? They, just came out of nowhere, it felt like, in terms of how the national media treated the SMU Mustangs. But look, they have the potential to prove that what happened last year was not a fluke. They have a squad, and it's not just Kevin Jennings, but it's really all over his roster. They have some studs that can play. And again, I think SMU could be in that hunt to be in the CFP once again. I got them as a 10-win team with the possibility of winning 11 games. But if they want to get to that 11-1 mark that they achieved last season and be a CFP team once again, which I think what we've seen from the playoff committee looks like 11-1 makes you a lock. If you're an ACC squad, you beat TCU on the road for Battle of the Iron Skillet, and then you also have Miami at home. I think that's certainly a winnable game for SMU as well. I think 11-1 is possible, but we'll split the difference here and we'll go 10-2. But I imagine that SMU, even if they drop both those games, they'll still have a very good season. Speaking of teams that I think are going to have aspirations of very good seasons, I think the Miami Hurricanes is certainly one of those teams. I got them as my second best team in the ACC. It feels like at times I stand alone on this particular take. Whenever I hear people talk about Miami, it does seem like a lot of folks are a lot lower on Miami than I am. But even if I stand alone, I'm going to say it right now. I think Miami can run the table and go undefeated in the regular season. I think they have that kind of talent, because I don't think the Even though they had a historically amazing offense last year, I actually think they aren't going to lose too much of a beat, so to speak. But, the hopes of an ACC title run, I mean, they have to run through Carson Beck. We've been told that he is recovered from his elbow injury that sustained in the SEC championship last year, and that he's 100%, he is throwing, should be good to go. But if we see 2023 Carson Beck, this Miami team should be rolling. If it's last year's Carson Beck and is a little bit more gun shy, it's a little bit of a different conversation. But regardless of how Carson Beck plays, another key component, how does new defensive coordinator Corey Hefferman fix this defense? This is a defense that was 70th in points allowed, which is completely unacceptable for a program that does bring in as much talent as Miami does have. Gotta absolutely do so much better than 70th. And you don't even have to be an elite defense. I think if you're at least an average to an above average defense, and then Carson Beck is a 2023 version, I don't see why they couldn't beat just about anybody that's on their schedule. They do have Notre Dame. I think that's going to be one of their toughest games that they'll have this upcoming season, at least in the regular season, of course. But Notre Dame, they do get them at home, so I like their chances in terms of beating Notre Dame at home, actually. And then they also have SMU on the road, which could be another tricky matchup. A matchup that I thought we were going to see in the ACC championship game, but that didn't just quite happen there. But I do have Miami going 12-0, and at the very worst, if they drop both of those toss-up games I talked about at home against Notre Dame or on the road against SMU, I think at the bare minimum they do what they did last year. They're 10-2 and are still at least in the conversation for the CFP. Which finally brings us to who I think is going to actually win the ACC this year. That is the Clemson Tigers. I don't think this is really a massive surprise whatsoever. They won the ACC championship last year, and yes, they did kind of backdoor their way in. They needed Miami to lose a couple of games late in the year in order to make that happen. But this time around, not only do I believe that they're not going to need any backdooring in order to make the ACC championship, I think this is also the type of team that could push for a national title this fall with the amount of returning production that is on this Clemson roster. They are among the top teams in the nation in terms of returning production, according to Bill Connolly. And one of those returning players is Cade Klubnik, who is, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the ACC. He's got the best. He's got his the receiving group at Clemson should be significantly better as well. The defense also should look better. They did kind of fold in critical moments last year. They should be an improvement as well under new defensive coordinator Tom Allen. Now, they will have some challenging games in non-conference play. Give credit to Clemson, too. They scheduled up. They are certainly not going to have to worry about strength of schedule if it comes down to an at-large bid for the Clemson Tigers. They have LSU at home to begin the season, and then they also have South Carolina at home, another really good football team that, they could drop. They could drop both of those games. That certainly could happen. Plus, Louisville on the road, which is always a pesky team to play, particularly on the road. So, for now, I have Clemson coming out and winning most of their games. I have them going 11-1 with the potential to finish the season undefeated. I think that could certainly happen. But worst case scenario, let's say they do drop those games at 9-3. I don't think it's too terribly likely, but it is certainly in the realm of possibility that they would finish 9-3, and that's a disappointment based on the level of talent that is on this roster. But that is going to wrap things up in terms of my breakdown of the entire ACC. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? And then also secondarily as well, while I do have a set schedule in terms of which conferences I break down next, I'm certainly someone that could be moved. So, if you're feeling a little spicy, let me know down in the comments section as well in terms of what conference would you like to see me break down next here on the channel? But I am your host, Jake, and this is College Football Red Zone. Checking out and seeing you guys next time.